So we have begun the Torah anew, the 5 books of Moses, aka the Torah, aka the Bible, the Pentateuch, something like that. So we've begun it anew, and yesterday we began chapter 1, verse 1, and the sages ask, how come it doesn't start with an aleph, which is 1, right? Why does it start with a bet, 2? So to teach us that we haven't really scratched the surface, right? We don't even know the aleph, and so therefore we begin with bet. But the first verse is in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Now, Genesis is there's probably more commentary on Genesis than anything else. Anything else that exists, because each word is so full and so much commentary begs commentary. So in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. The thought process is so that within 1 millisecond, or I don't know if there's if you can break it down even smaller. The God created everything. He created, within 1 second, he created the heavens and the earth and the constellations and the water and the etc. Everything that we see that he did throughout the 7 days of creation, or the 6 days plus 1. He did everything, the birds, etc. But when he created them, and he created it all in one mess. Everything was created together. But rather, then they were extrapolated and separated and placed where they're supposed to be in their proper context and in their proper form throughout those few days of creation. So it's almost as if you take a Play-Doh, of a blue Play-Doh, and you mix yellow in it and green in it, and this and that. It becomes one odd-looking greenish, blackish ball. And then you start, which is impossible for us, to start separating the colors once again. So that's what God did. And the Torah uses the term Elohim, Bereishit bara Elohim. God created the heavens and the earth, and it doesn't use the tetragrammaton. It doesn't use Adonai, which is the God of compassion. Elohim is the God of justice. And essentially, until man was created, you don't see the term Adonai. You only see Elohim. And the reason for that is that initially, when God created the world, God wanted to create the world with complete justice. You did something good, you get rewarded. You did something negative, you get punished. And that's the way God wanted to create the world. Once he created the human being, once he created Adam, he saw that if he did that, every time Adam did a good deed, he'd be rewarded with with this $1,000 in his Swiss bank account, run by Preston. And every time he did something negative, he would have to, or she would have to, go to Dr. Goldman or a dentist for a root canal. That would take away free will. So God said, I cannot create man with only Elohim. I have to create man with compassion and justice. And that allows God to suspend punishment, postpone punishment, suspend reward, postpone reward, mix reward and punishment together. Because if Adonai is the God of compassion and transcendence, so it's not happening, doesn't have to happen right here, right now, as opposed to Elohim, which is the God of judgment. But in the beginning, God created, Elohim created, the God of justice, created everything, the heaven and the earth and all its contents. Then the Torah tells us on the first day, God created light and darkness. And he called the light day, and the night he called darkness. But we have a problem. And the problem is that God didn't create the sun and the moon and the stars. He didn't flesh them out and place them until the fourth day. So what is this light? What is it? So Rashi says that this light was nothing to do with the sun and the moon. Nothing. This light was a spiritual light. Basically, you can be illuminated by God's presence, or you can be eliminated by the lack of God's presence. And has nothing to do with the physical orb in the sky, or the moon that gets light from the physical orb in the sky called the sun, but rather this is a whole different light. Spirituality versus non-spirituality, or perhaps spirituality versus impurity. Light is synonymous with spirituality. Darkness is the dark side of the force. The non, it's the antithesis of spirituality, of godliness. So and God vayavdel, God made a separation. It was clearly delineated what's good and what's bad, what's holy, what's unholy, what's pure, what's impure, etc. And that's the way Elohim created the world. That it was very clear. This is the wrong path. This is the good path. This is holiness. This is unholiness. This is pure. This is impure. And that was the first day. Now, it didn't last, because once God created man, he included Adonai in the picture. So now things became fuzzy and it wasn't as clear. Another commentary, and they're not mutually exclusive, another commentary is that God created this light, which is known as reward. Reward. God created this spiritual light for the tzaddikim, the righteous, to be able to use. Yet you hear stories of the righteous and the prophets and the authors of the Mishnah and authors of the Talmud and the Rashi, that they all had this Ruach HaKodesh, this Holy Spirit, this clairvoyance, this prophecy, if you will. That is the light we're talking about. On that day, God created a sixth sense, where certain people would be more in the know than other people. That's the light it's referring to. God also created a certain denseness or obtuseness on that day, which is the wicked or the common folk could not see the forest for the trees. That even though it makes sense, by the way, this is true of man specifically. If you think about it, I heard a commercial the other day. I think it was on Friday. There's a fellow who claims that he's a life coach, and he's certified in hypnotherapy. Dr. Errol Gluck, I think his name is. You probably heard him on the radio. I don't have TV, so I only heard him on the radio. And what he says was that man's mortal enemy is themselves, is their own mind. That man, when they get to a point in a funk where they cannot see clearly, they cannot think clearly, and they are their own worst enemy. They make decisions based on their distorted view of things. And that is the darkness that perhaps is referring to. That if you could see clearly, and the problem is when you're subjective, it's very hard to think clearly. Objectivity is light. Subjectivity is darkness. Many times we go and seek advice, whether it's from a therapist, from a counselor, from a psychologist, from a rabbi, from a friend, from a mentor, to a boss, to a rabbi, to a tzaddik, and we seek advice and counsel, and they give you counsel, and you say to yourself, why didn't I think of that? Well, you know why? Because God created darkness. and they have the light. So it doesn't have to be necessarily prophecy. It just has to be an ability to see more clearly because you're objective, as opposed to somebody else who's talking about their life, the subjective. And therefore we seek counsel because we are subjective. And therefore, if somebody comes to you for advice, and even if you're not a specialist, while you can give a disclaimer, I'm not a specialist, you can still hear him out and say, yeah, I think maybe you do need to reach out to your wife and you do need to apologize. Or you tell the wife, you do need to reach out to your husband's mother, your mother-in-law, and apologize. Because while what you said wasn't offensive, perhaps your tone was offensive. On and on and on and on and on. But Rashi says that this is a light that is for tzaddikim, the righteous, and whereas the wicked cannot tap into. It has nothing to do with the sun and the moon and the stars. It has to do with its own spiritual light. Now, Rashi has a question. The very first Rashi on the Torah, the very first one, not the second one, not in the middle, not at the end, but the foremost thing on Rashi's mind, which is very, very powerful. So Rashi says, hold on a second. If the Torah is the book of laws, if the Torah is the book of instruction, if the Torah is the book of mitzvahs, why start from here? Should have started that God told the Jewish people, and you can read the story of the Jewish people in another book called The Jewish People, the history of the Jewish people. But Torah's laws, mitzvahs, start from the first mitzvah. HaChodesh hazeh lachem, that you need to calculate the months. You need to calculate. The Jewish law is that we work via the Gregorian month, the lunar month, and we have to calculate the month to know when our holidays are. How we got to these holidays, how we got to the moon, that's a whole separate book, but that's not laws. These are stories. These are some people call them fables. I don't. But these are stories. This is in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That should be in a documentary. It shouldn't be in a book of laws. So Rashi says, no, it's a law. It's a law. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. God created the heaven and the earth. And therefore, because God created the heaven and the earth, says Rashi, is he wanted to tell the world, and specifically the inhabitants of Israel, specifically the Jewish people, who could eventually tell the United Nations. Rashi doesn't call them. Rashi just says the assembly of nation of goyim, of basically tell the Gentiles, not in a derogatory term. Tell the goyim that you have no right to tell us that the land of Israel does not belong to us, the Jewish people. It does. And you know why it does? Says Rashi, the very first Rashi, is because God, the very same God who created the heavens and the earth, the very same God who created all its contents, including Israel, including Saudi Arabia, including Bahrain, including United States, France, all the Arab countries. God created everything. And God chose to give this sliver of land to Israel. How dare you contest the creator of the world's wishes? This is a divine will, divine ordinance, divine law. And how could you challenge the creator? And he says, and that is why we start from here. It's to set the record straight. Israel is not just because a bunch of European Jews settled there. It's not because a bunch of European Jews, with the help of the United States and Italians, and in the beginning, even the French till 1967, armaments and air force. No, that's not why we have Israel. And no, Israel and Tokyo do not have the same holiness. Israel and Paris are not the same. Israel and Liberia are not the same. There was a movement to say, settle in Liberia. Why do you need Israel? What do you have to stoke the coals? What do you have to wake the sleeping giant? Why do you have to poke a rabid dog in the eyes? Just settle in Liberia already. No, Israel's holy. And it's not our idea. If you continue reading Genesis, God said, God told Abraham, to you and your children, I'm going to give this land. And it's going to be theirs. So, nations of the world, get off your high horse. And stop. This is God's wish. Now, talk about a Holy Spirit. Talk about prophecy. Talk about clairvoyance. My goodness. You tell me, Rashi has his finger on the pulse. Rashi has his finger on the nuclear button here. Rashi made it very clear that we were going to get challenged by the people, and people as low and debased as Arafat, who were going to tell us that the land is not ours, it belongs to us. Comes along Rashi and says, fly a kite. God created the heaven and earth. God created all. And therefore, get lost. God tells Saddam Hussein, Abbas, right? Sadat, Assad, get lost. Get lost. And actually we can, the aforementioned names are people who should not have any sway or opinion either. They're evil. But they do, and therefore we have to step up to them and say, stop it. It's lies and fabrication. The very first Rashi. Incredible. So God said Yom Echad, it was the first day. Now, he didn't say Yom Rishon. He said Yom Echad, day one, as opposed to Yom Rishon, the first day. Because on that day, it was Echad. On that day, nothing other than God was created. God is not a creation. Until that day, God was alone. God in his full glory and force. God at, 1,000,000 volts of energy. I'm sorry, maybe watts of energy. Lenny will send us a correction. God in his full blast of radiation. But on day one, God condensed himself. God was mitzamtzem. God contracted himself in order to be able to the ability to create. But on day one, he didn't really create anything. Spirituality is not a creation. Spirituality is what we call the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is godliness, but godliness that's in touch with creation. If God didn't condense or contract himself, you can't create a world. You can't do the next thing you want to do. But it's still God. So Yom Echad, God, just God. That's it. Just God, nothing else. The second day, there was already, as we'll read, there was the world. He created this earth that he created. He already gave an energy to that was called water, which is a creation. It's a creation. And God created God, there was just water everywhere. Water, by the way, symbolizes Torah. Water also symbolizes a Mayim el Torah, spirituality. So everything was full of spirituality, but in a created form. And the whole world, the whole universe, the whole cosmos was just water. All water all the time. There's a movie, by the way, called Waterworld. Right? This is probably what it looked like. I never saw the movie, but I think of when you hear the premise. So so everything was just water, water, water. And God said, okay, I have to separate. So God said, okay, waters up. Waters of spirituality ascend. Waters of physicality remain where you are and cover the earth. So by the end of the second day, you had spirituality, heavenly spirituality. You had physical spirituality, which was a creation. According to the Kabbalists, certain levels of angels existed on that day, came to being on that day. The earth was inhabitable by the end of the second day. It was just water. So on the third day, God said, okay, waters gather. I want you to gather. You gather. We're going to call this the Atlantic. We're going to call this the Pacific. We're going to call this the Mediterranean. We're going to call this the Caribbean. We're going to call this the Black Sea, or whatever, all the different, and so before, if God would have removed all the water, completely removed all the water of the world, what we would have seen, we would have seen the world the way God created it, with the Mariana Trench, and with the with the different, it may have been not as deep as then, but because things do evolve, evolution does exist, but God separated and made the waters deep here, the waters deep here, and then therefore earth was shown. And it may have not looked like the map that we have today, but there was earth. How many continents? I don't know. Were they all connected? I don't know. No idea. I'm sure people do know. I don't know. And once he had earth, he said, okay, I got earth. There you go, Herman. I got earth. I'm going to create trees. I'm going to create grass. I'm going to create fruits. I'm going to create, etc., etc. Now, what Herman just showed leads us to actually a very godly invention. It's called the beach. What is the beach? The beach is 15 or 20 feet worth of land that is sandy. And the sand is very deep. And the sand is made up of crushed rocks, right? And it's very, very fine rocks. But if you think about it, and we say it in the Tehillim, we say it in our prayers, Hanosin Gvul Yam, who gave a border to the sea. There's 3,000 kilometers of water, right? The Pacific Ocean. 3,000. And where the ocean ends, you have 15 feet of sand. What's to stop the ocean from just continuing and just flooding the earth? 15 feet is nothing. 3,000 kilometers, and you have 15 feet, right? You have what do you have? You have nothing. 1/10 of a mile, less, and that stops 3,000. So yeah, we know the moon, etc. But the idea is that God made a border. And if God for 1 second lifts the border, you have something called a tsunami, which kills thousands, ruins crop and trees and houses, and just creates mass devastation, right? Right? Um, and yeah, it's absolutely what liquid and solid mean. But just if God would remove the border for 1 second, the water would inundate, completely inundate the world. But he doesn't. God puts this, and that's what was created on the third day. Borders, boundaries. America, you stop here. You these are your boundaries, right? Australia, these are your boundaries. New Zealand, these are your boundaries. Israel, these are your boundaries, etc., etc. That's what God did. That's what God did. And it was the third day. And by the way, this is the only day where God says "Kitov" twice. On the first day, it says God created the heavens and the earth, and He saw that it was good. On the second day, He split the waters. He doesn't say it was good because He wasn't done. On the third day, He continued splitting the waters. Now He could say it was good, and He created the trees and the vegetation, the crops, and seeds and apples and pears and soybeans, which led to tofu, and edamame, and cottage cheese was not invented yet. And He said, okay, it's all good. It's all good. So He said it twice. It was good. Tuesday is actually considered a very auspicious day. We start a new business, we try and do it on Tuesday. We move homes, we try and do it on Tuesday. Something new and exciting in our life, we push it off till Tuesday. Because God said Kitov twice. And any questions this one? Meanwhile, these first 3 days, there was really no purpose. So there was water. So there was trees, right? Still no purpose. And there was also no day and night. There was a spiritual day and night. There wasn't a day and night. So this is actually one of the answers to people who say, so Judaism says God created the world, and the world is 5,782 years old. And yet scientists say they have found different artifacts that when they carbon date, it's older than that. So there's a few responses. One is, in the beginning, as we said, God created the heaven and the earth. God created the heaven and the earth immediately on the first day, everything, all its contents. But there was no day and night. This is not the Rebbe's shitta. This is Gerald Schroeder's thoughts. There's no day and night. Who knows how long it took, what the definition of when God finally decided to create the sun and the moon. So who knows? He created the mountains and the hills on the third day. He created the rocks, etc. But who knows how long it was till He created the sun and the moon and started this process called day and night. Even day and night, even sun and moon, who knows how long that was, right? Until things got established. So we find artifacts that thousands of years old, okay, millions of years old, okay. The other thing, so that's Gerald Schroeder. He's a scientist, trying to reconcile Torah and science. The Rebbe's opinion is that Torah, there was day and night, there was 24-hour cycle. It wasn't more than that. He says, however, God didn't create a new world. God created an old world. God created a world where the uranium, and the carbon, and carbon already started to turn to lead, right? It was an old world. When God created the trees, they already had fruit. When God created the earth, it already had the Mariana Trench. When God created the wheat, it already had wheat. It wasn't just a seedling. It weren't just saplings. When God created humans, they were already full grown. They were full grown human beings.
Yeah, so nice. Yeah. Did you used to come when?
Right? God created the full grown human beings, already mature, already have the ability to copulate, and which they did on the first day. Talk about sex before marriage. Talk about sex on the first date, rather. So he didn't create. Right? Then the Rebbe says, in addition, when you have a flood, yes, dinosaurs is a little bit different, but when you have a flood and the globe was covered with water, it says the immense pressure of the water distorts the aging process. It looks older than what it is. And therefore, after the flood, the world looked really a lot older than it was, because you had for a year, right? It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, but the water remained for a year. You sit in a bathtub for half hour, right? It has an effect on your body. I think it's called the pruning effect. You have water sitting there. It's going to look different. Salt water. It's going to look different. Dinosaurs, they say, is because God did not let them on the ark. So they did. Excuse me. They did exist, but God didn't say, no, you're not getting on. You're too vicious and vile and wild and violent, and not letting you on. On the fourth day, God said, let there be lights in the firmament to separate between days and nights. Now, it seems like we already got days and nights. And God said there will be for signs, for festivals, Yom Tov. There'll be for special days, there'll be for years, etc. And he says, and these will be lights in the firmament. And it was so. Right? So it seems like God already set into motion this concept called a calendar. And the calendar wasn't the idea of a calendar that was invented by man that we have, it's so January 1st to December 31st. That's arbitrary. God's calendar is different. Basically, when God created the sun and the moon and the stars, we're taught that every 19 years, the calendar starts again. So in other words, every 19 years, your Hebrew birthday and your English birthday, your secular civil birthday, will be exactly on the same date. Exactly the same date. So my birthday is March 17th. My Hebrew birthday is the 25th of Adar. A week apart, 2 weeks apart, 10 days apart, 13 days apart, 3 days apart. Every 19 years, they sync. And March 17th and the 25th of Adar come out exactly the same day. So there is a calendar. There is something, and it's to do with the lunar and the solar calendar every 19 years being in sync. So they're in sync, and then they start getting out of sync. And then 19 years later, they're in sync. So this is God's calendar we're talking about. Also, we know that every 28 years, the sun and the moon are in exactly the same place in the orbit as they were 28 years before that, as they were 28 years before that, as they were 28 years before that, as they were on the day they were placed, creation. 28 years, the sun goes to exactly the same spot. it was 28 years ago. That's another type of calendar. It's not arbitrary. Things happen. There's chemical reactions, and there's science behind this. It probably gives the reason why every 17 years the cicadas come. If there's something happens, right? And there's different cyclical things that happen. Is because the atmosphere is correct. Something occurs. We go further into the creation. It says, and God created the two great luminaries. Two great luminaries. The next words are the great one for the day and the smaller one for the night and the stars. So according to the Midrash, is that God created two great luminaries. The sun and the moon were the same size. The moon had qualities of its own. It had illuminating qualities of its own. It had its own fire. It had its own light. And then the next words, God called him the great one and the smaller one. Then God changed his mind. And God said, you know what? I'm going to create I can't have two exactly the same powerful orbs in the sun, in the orbit. I cannot. I don't want it. I want one to reign supreme, and we're going to call that day. And then I want one that's less powerful, that's going to receive its energy directly from another source, but not have energy itself, illuminating qualities itself. And God did that. The Midrash gives the reason why. The Midrash said, now we have to take it with a pinch of salt, but I think the lesson is a good one. The Midrash says that the moon turned to God and said, two crowns? God, you got me and the sun dueling for the same cosmos, for the same universe? Doesn't make sense. God said, you're right. You're right. I'm going to make you smaller. Because, yeah, otherwise you're gonna bicker between you. The sun will refuse to set in honor of the moon. The moon will refuse to set in honor of the sun. So God said, I'm going to give you a boss called the sun. And you follow the sun's trajectory. When the sun goes like this, when the sun goes like this, you go like this, etc., etc. And then God said, however, I'm going to give you the stars. So you'll be in that way. The stars will be almost like your servants. So you will not be dissed completely, but rather you'll look the prominence. You'll be the big, and then the little ones around you. And that was the fourth day. On the fifth day, God said, well, on the first day, I created the heaven and the earth. And I put the sun and the moon in the heaven and the earth. On the second day, I created land. So now, and sea. Now let me populate them. So God created the birds, the eagle, the osprey, the hawk, the vulture, the pigeon, the New York pigeon, a whole separate creation. Trafalgar Square pigeon. By the way, I was reading recently. I think it was, I saw it on the internet that the scientists said that the pigeons can actually understand a bunch of words from the human being. A bunch of words. So just like a dog, when we talk to a dog, the dog understands us, the commands, whether they do it or not is something else. Sit, it sits. A pigeon can also. So I was wondering if an American tourist is in Trafalgar Square and he turns to the pigeon, he says, leave me alone. Stop crapping on me. Does one pigeon turn to the other and say, Do you understand what he's saying? Because I don't. Do you know what he wants? Because I don't. He's like not speaking clear, is he? Likewise, the American pigeon, when he has a Chinese, goes, well, what is he saying? I don't understand. It's so confusing. And the Chinaman is yelling. Pigeon doesn't understand. So God created the birds. God created the fish. God created the Loch Ness. He created the whale. He created the beluga. He created the white whale, the killer whale, orca, whatever, the goldfish, the everything and everything. And he populated it. The Rashi says he also created on that day, he created the Shor Habar and the Leviathan. Shor Habar is the animal that will slaughter when Mashiach comes. It's some type of huge animal, ox. You created the Leviathan. He created this huge, huge fish. The Mashiach comes, will eat from. And God originally created 2 Leviathans, says Rashi, but one died because 2 Leviathans was too much for the world. It was too big. It would have ruined the circle of life. And that's what he created on the 5th day. So and he gave them a blessing, be fruitful and multiply. You jellyfish, come on, multiply. You squid, octopus, multiply. He gave them a command. And likewise to the animals. He gave them a command. Multiply. Now, well, we'll get back home. I'm getting there too. Okay. That's the 5th day. On the 6th day, God said, okay, now it's time for me to create every other type of life force. So God created creatures, each according to its kind. The animals, the creeping things, the beasts, the T-Rex, right? The lions and tigers and bears and leopards and snow leopards and impalas. And it was so. God made the beast of the earth according to its kind, and the animal according to its kind, and the creeping being of the ground according to its kind. The insects, the mosquito, God created. According to the commentaries, he created the virus, the ability to have COVID, the ability to have the swine flu, and Ebola. All this was created on this day. And then God said, let's create man, the last thing, the very last thing. Let's create man in our image and our likeness. They shall rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky and over the animal and over the whole earth and every creeping thing. And God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created. Male and female, he created them. So the last thing he did was he created mankind. He created Adam, and according to the Torah, he created them. He created Adam and Chava. He created them as one entity, 2 faces attached back to back. And then later on, he split them and he called one Adam and one Chava. That's the Midrash, how he explains male and female, he created them. The simple explanation was, he's talking about the future. He created male and then he created female. And he says, let man rule. Man has the rule of the earth. It was man's job. Man has a natural, God-given the ability to rule. Animals are instinctually afraid of man. That's true of lions, tigers, and bears. They are fearful. You go near their cubs, they're going to get crazy. But they are fearful. They won't attack man. The amount of shark bites, by the way, that occur in any given year is so minuscule. You have more chance of being in a plane crash, God forbid, than get bitten by a shark. Mosquito, I don't know, because they're not afraid. And it says, what does it mean, let us make man? God was saying, there's a few different commentaries. God was saying to the attributes, okay, man is different. Man, I'm going to make very differently. I'm going to make with attributes. I'm going to give man patience. I'm going to give man an anger. I'm going to give man compassion. I'm going to give man the ability to be kind, the ability to be cruel, the ability to be just, the ability to have stamina in order to overcome an obstacle. So God was talking to all his attributes. Come, let me do something I haven't done before in the animals. I'm going to take all of my qualities. And that's what it means man was created in God's image. Not that God has a nostril and nose hair, and not that God has ears and earwax, not that God has teeth, and therefore God requires root canal, not that God needs Dr. Goldman's services. Dr. Goldman is an obstetrician, a gynecologist. Right? God does not have a prostate, right? But it means that God has attributes. And God created mankind with attributes that are in God's image. That's what it means in God's image. Now let's take a look at the next verse after. God blessed them. God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. And God saw what he created, and it was good, etc., etc. And that was the end of the sixth day. Now, if you look carefully in the Torah, it says, God blessed them. God said to them, fill the earth and subdue its rule, right? Every living thing. And before that, God created man in his image, in the image of God. And before that, God created the animals, each according to his kind. And he said, be fruitful and multiply. God said, be fruitful and multiply, right? To the man, separately to the man, separately to the woman, separately to mankind, separately to the animal, separately to the fish. Here's the interesting part. A fish, a goldfish, procreates with the goldfish. Squid with a squid. A leopard with a leopard. A tadpole with a frog with a frog. Toad with a toad. And they don't stray. You will never see a cat, right, in the street humping a dog. You just won't see it. The only species that did not listen to this command was mankind. You don't find perversion with the animals. You don't find an act of bestiality where the animal, they initiated it. You just don't find such a thing. An horse and a mule didn't go to each other and said, let's procreate. Man forced that upon them. You can't do that according to Torah. You cannot do that. According to Torah, you can't take a a lion and a tiger and breed them together to make a liger. You're not allowed to do that. You can't take a horse and mule. You can't take a horse and right and create this make a mule. You can't do that. Once it's there, you can use it. You can read the, but you're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to put them together. And it's not only animals. You, a Jew, biblical command, at first it was universal. You cannot take the seeds of an orange and mix it with the seeds of a lemon. You can't graft one branch of a fruit tree to another branch of a fruit tree. You can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. You're allowed to eat a tangelo. You're allowed to eat I don't know, mandarin or whatever. I don't know which one is mixed or not. You're allowed to eat it. You're allowed to eat a grapefruit. You're allowed to eat, but you're not allowed to do it. You're allowed to eat. A great question from Preston. Can you take two different bacteria, create a super bacteria? It's called gain of function. Clearly, gain of function is deleterious to the world. So I'm sure that that's forbidden as well. God wanted everything according to its kind. You cannot, when you grow fruit, when you grow vegetables, it's in the Torah. You have to separate the seeds. You got to have a certain amount of space between your grapes and your olives. Got to be. The roots can't touch. Certain type of roots are more prolific than others. You got to watch for that. And there's a whole Mishnah called Kalayim, hundreds of halachas about how to plant. Right? You can't do it. You can't crossbreed in any way, shape, or form. I probably mixing seed is also probably to each his kind. I from the Torah's perspective, right? Homosexuality is out. It's out. Whether it's for me to throw rocks and stones, absolutely not. Right? Because if I'm going to start throwing rocks and stones, I should probably throw a rock and a stone at myself, because is my kitchenware, is my kitchen completely clean? Do I do everything according to God's will? You don't find, though, a male tiger with another male tiger. You just don't find it. It doesn't exist. Yeah, there are other faults. A lion would kill his own offspring in order to make sure he remains head of the pack. But you just don't find it. You just don't find it. So the Torah forbids homosexuality. It's don't stray from what you programmed to do. You have free will, though, so you could do it. For me to condemn it, if I was to condemn that, I would have to condemn anybody and everybody that smokes on Shabbat. I would have to condemn anybody and everybody that eats pizza, that it does not have a supervision. Anybody and everybody that eats a Jaffa orange during the sabbatical year, which they bought at ShopRite. I think that that's not my job. I'm not judge. I'm not jury. I'm not executioner. I am not the one to say, hey, you stop with that nonsense. That's not me. That's not me. And I don't believe it's for anybody. So if somebody wants to kick out somebody from their community because they're gay, then I believe they need to kick out someone from their community, right? Who doesn't pray hard enough, because that's also biblical. So right? Watch your own. Be in charge of yourself. Then and only then can you start looking a little bit out of yourself to see your kids and to see your family. But once but until you do, yesterday somebody complained to me, and with this end, because I have to give a speech in the town of Huntington at 11. So somebody complained to me yesterday. It says it's terrible, and it's halacha. Jewish law states that children must be seen and not heard in the synagogue. And if they cause noise, you have to remove them. So this fellow came over to me and he said, remove the kids. It's halacha, Rabbi, it's Jewish law. So I looked at him, I said, this is what bothers you? This is what bothers you? I believe there's 609 other things that you have to do before we turn our attention to the kids. There's so many things you don't do, so many things I don't do and I should do. I'm going to start pointing fingers at the kids. When you become a tzaddik, we'll talk. Until then, far be it from me to pass judgment. And therefore, I don't have an opinion. I don't have an opinion, a personal opinion, who does right, who's better than us, who's one better than the other. Is cheating on your wife better, but with a woman better than having a homosexual relationship? Is stealing from your partner? You steal in business. Is that better than a lesbian? Who am I? I have no idea. I don't profess to have any idea whatsoever. So it's not for me. I don't know. I can only know what the way I see it, the way I read it, and from the Torah, and take care of myself to the best of my ability. Am I flawed human? Yes. Do I keep everything? No. Do I need to do better? Yes. That's all I can be concerned about. And teach, not judge, teach. Other than that, I just gotta return calls, make sure I tell my wife she looks good today. She absolutely is not fat. And my kids, I love you. But your kids, what if they don't wear a yarmulke in the street? I love you. I gotta make sure I wear a yarmulke. That's all. We'll talk. More to come. This is being recorded, so it will be ready shortly for recording. God bless.
Thank you so much. It was great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Be well.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.